Hey everybody, I'm Justin Bone.
And I'm Mike Val.
And this is the Bone and Zano Zone, where we are always on the lanes, off the charts, and on the mic. Hello everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Bone and Zano Zone podcast presented by BuddiesProShop.com. Mike, we're back for part two of the great debate that we're having on our show.
Yeah, this has been a good discussion for the past month or so now, and it's drawn a lot of traffic, I guess you want to call it, in the Facebook world and the internet.
Yeah, I think it's such an interesting topic, especially from sport to sport.
Yeah, and it raises a lot of questions and a lot of why this and why that and what if. So I think tonight with our guest, we will put it to bed maybe. And we also have a special guest too that we have not disclosed.
Yeah, so before we get into that, I actually want to share a quick photo, an update from Howell Lanes.
Oh, yes, the Bone Elite Training Center.
Yeah, so Bones Elite Training and RevRates VIP Entertainment. If you guys haven't heard about it yet, go check out RevRates.vip for more information. You guys can subscribe to it. Basically going to be a VIP entertainment space and a high-level training center all at the same time. So here's an update from construction of what is now lanes 1 through 5 at Howell Lanes and what's going to be RevRates and Bones Elite Training.
It's looking good. It's come a long way, and we're looking forward to the finished product.
Yeah, as you can see, some outline is up for the wall already. The famous carpet wall of Howell Lanes is already down on the low end. Masking units are gone. Machines are being torn apart. Cardboard on the lanes. Gotta preserve those the right way.
Yep.
So it's pretty exciting stuff as I'm continuing to see the pictures day and day. It's the progress is unreal.
I was there last night. It's looking good. So it's come a long way, and it's about time that it's getting completed.
Yeah, so if you guys want to follow along with that, you guys can check out RevRates.vip or RevRates VIP Entertainment on Facebook or Instagram, or Bones Elite Training on Facebook or Instagram. Go check it out. You guys can stay tuned with all the construction updates. We're looking to come out with that towards the end of the spring. That'll be all opened up.
Got it. So
I think without further ado, you should give your famous Mike Val introductions.
I don't know how to introduce this one. I don't. I mean, there's nothing the man hasn't done. I truly don't know what else to say but the greatest, but I do have one question for him. And this is something, Justin, that I've never asked anybody. So I'd like to bring on the greatest that I've ever seen, Walter Ray Williams. Hello, Walter Ray. I don't know how to introduce you the right way, so I'm just going to say the greatest. But I do have one question, and I want to put this to bed right now. Who's your favorite character on Ozark?
That's an interesting question. I've actually watched this show. My wife is seriously into it. What I'm amazed is, for those of you who've never watched it, I'm amazed that every episode they managed to survive. I mean, to me, it's like, they're not making it. They're, they managed to sneak through. Of course, some characters do get snuffed off, but I don't know. I do enjoy the show though. I don't really have a favorite character. So
do you like Ruth? Are we a Ruth fan? I like Ruth.
I like Ruth. My wife really likes Ruth.
It's a great show, and Justin, I had to go there. So
I'm glad you knew where you were going, because I had no idea where you were going with your question. So,
well, no, I'm never going to cross the line, but I didn't want to give a bowling question right off the bat. Yeah.
No, I didn't know what question you were asking, so I was like, oh, I wonder what he's going to ask him.
A little birdie told me that he watches the show that I like, and I wanted to see who his favorite character was.
Okay.
Yeah.
And have you completed the first part of season 4?
Yeah. So we watched it in like 2 days.
Yeah, we did too. So, Justin, we do have a surprise. Since we're going to go now, we'll go back on the bowling topic.
Yeah.
So this whole episode is basically geared toward the Hall of Fame and our discussion that we had. And Walter Ray kind of chimed in a couple weeks ago on his views of the Hall of Fame. And we have another guest that we've been talking about the past couple of weeks. So why don't you take over now, Mr. Bone?
Yeah. So, I mean, we've kind of been talking about what is basically enough to throw you over that to be eligible for the Hall of Fame. And we've talked about a couple of guys, but we've actually talked about one of the guys in particular that we have on tonight. Mike, thank you for that. We've talked about him more than once in our debate, and he's probably, from what we've come across, the closest guy to being thrown over that line. So without further ado, let's introduce Steve Jaros.
Steve.
How you doing, guys? Walter, Justin, Mike, how you doing, guys?
What's up, buddy? How are you?
I'm doing all right.
You staying warm up there? Of course, you guys are all up in the north. It was cold down here. It was like only 50 degrees down here, so I can't imagine what you guys are dealing with.
Well, we're used to it. We just have to shovel the stuff. You guys have to dodge all the iguanas that are falling out of the trees. So that's
they're way south. They're not up where I'm at.
But
I wish I was down there. It's a lot warmer down there.
It's been sunny and like 35, 38, so it's almost golf weather up here.
Oh my God, that's way too cold.
It was almost 60 here today in Kansas.
Wow, it's always warmer there than it is here.
Must be nice, Justin.
The next couple of days is going to warm up down here. So, but yeah.
Yeah, we had 6 inches of snow on Wednesday, so
we got it 1.5 feet last weekend.
Nothing.
Yeah.
Sweet.
And it's gone now. So
yeah,
I'm sure you've heard from Mom. It's all gone up here.
That's nuts.
It is. So how do you want to start this, Justin? Do you want to recap really quick the Open from this weekend? We'll do like a little 5-minute segment on the U.S. Open.
Yeah, I think we'll kind of give a quick little recap of what's happened the last couple of weeks in the bowling world. Belmo wins his 14th major at the Players, and Anthony Simonson becomes the youngest player ever to win 3 majors at, 24, 25?
Yeah, I think it's 25.
Yeah, before I won my first title. It's amazing. The younger players, of course, back then, we had 30 plus tournaments on tour, and I was on tour for 3 full years before I won a tournament. So it was I don't know the number, but it was about my 100th tournament that I won my very first title. And guys are like, what? It's like, wow, you got so many titles. But, we bowled a lot of tournaments back then, but there was also, it was different, and, it took a while, and I didn't bowl collegiately. So I just bowled locally, and I started bowling regionals and local tournaments and stuff. And when I went on tour, I was a decent bowler, but I knew I wasn't the best bowler in Southern California, which is where I was living at the time. And, but I knew I was a decent bowler. And fortunately, I made more money than I spent my first couple of years on tour. But it took me a little while to learn to bowl better. And then, finally had a breakout year and managed to win titles and Player of the Year. But yeah, it's amazing that Jason's won 14 majors. I mean, that's kind of on the ridiculous side. And and Anthony's right there. He's got 3 already, and he's not even 26.
Does he have more majors than standard titles, Justin?
Yes,
Jason does. Yes.
Wow.
Yes. Which is also another. But the other part of that is they don't have as many tournaments as they used to. I mean, now they've got 16 or 18, and that's including all the smaller tournaments that Jason doesn't participate in. So because he goes home to Australia. They made a big deal about him not bowling tournaments last summer. And, they said it was because of COVID. And I think that was only a small part of it. I think his wife was having their 4th child. And he's got a family and he loves his family, and it's really hard traveling away from your family. Steve knows that. I never had to deal with that while I was traveling on tour. So, but it's definitely, and not to mention, it's just a huge, trip across that big old huge pond. And it's like you just don't see your family for a long time. Where if we live here in the States, we at least go home, a week, every couple of weeks or something like that to see your family and stuff. Or maybe they might travel with you or whatever. And it's totally different situation with Jason. And, I think, so he doesn't bowl every single tournament. If he bowled every single tournament, I'm sure he'd have a few more titles. Just guessing.
Yeah. And I did see something before Simo won the Open, that in a stretch of time from like 2013 to now, Belmo had won like 13 or 14 majors. So I think his first one came in 2011. From 2013 to now, there had not been one person to win 3 or more besides Frankie. And he had won 14.
Yeah.
Unreal.
Pretty dominant. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah. So let's talk about the Open really quick, Justin.
Let's go ahead.
I don't even know where you start. Did you honestly think Belmo was not going to run the ladder after he got through the first 2 matches?
I thought he was. He looked pretty solid.
And I haven't seen, but I think he posted something about that he regrets his decision, changing out of the urethane. I think had he stayed with urethane, he would have been tough to beat. I think he was under the mistaken, impression that he had calmed the lanes down a little bit with urethane and thought that he'd be able to, use reactive and have a really good reaction, and obviously he didn't. And people don't understand, in that environment, it's a totally different animal when you're bowling on TV. And, they talk about, in qualifying or match play or whatever, the amount of games and stuff, and then they can go from urethane to reactive or whatever the case is, depending on who the player is. It's so few games and shots made compared to the normal qualifying rounds and stuff. It's amazing. And most of the third game or whatever, it's not the same as a third game in qualifying, not even close. It's like half the number of games, and it's, and I'm pretty sure he regrets that decision, and he just didn't make he didn't make the quality shots that he needed to once he made the big move. And, it was unfortunately for him, and Anthony was able to take advantage of it through great shots in the 10th frame. Mm-hmm. And then EJ bowled a horrible game, and again, Anthony threw some great shots. He figured out what to do, and he made the great shots, and the other part of that is, the step ladder. That's part of the PBA Tour, has been since 1963 or something like that. And I shouldn't say nobody. I would say most of the players would rather not see it. However, without the step ladder, the TV shows would probably be way less ratings than they are. And, people would not. I personally, as a bowler, would rather see, the guys bowling those last few games of position, the last few games of match play round robin, and, and seeing those guys compete for the title and that be the title. But I'm a different person than most people. And it's they compare it to golf. Basically, I say, okay, you take a golf tournament. Now you take the top 5 guys, and now they're going to have a playoff where they play basically a 3-hole match, and that's your match. Statistically, it's about the same, And if they did that, the golfers would say absolutely not. However, if they did that, it would be very exciting. Think about it. It would be very exciting if they did something like that. In bowling, it makes the shows a lot more exciting to have that step ladder. But those guys that are the tournament leaders are not going to win half the time. And it's actually a little less than that.
And it showed on Saturday. It did.
Well, and, it was kind of funny because the tournament they had, the Players Championship, that was actually, most of those guys in the regionals, I think 4 of the 5 actually won. I think Belmo was the only one who wasn't the leader who won his region.
Right. Yeah, I think so.
Arturo.
Okay.
I think the first 3 were the tournament leaders.
The first 3 won, yeah.
So,
but another major in the books, and strong showing for Simo. And like you said,
great.
Walter,
I
right?
mean, he did what he needed to do, and anybody who makes a TV show is a great bowler,
especially at the U.S. Open.
But any tournament, it doesn't matter. Any tournament, because you're bowling against quality players, and it doesn't matter, even the formats, even some of the screwy formats, they're all great players. You don't get to TV without being a great player.
And it's true. And you guys have.
That was a gutsy ball change that he made in the 9th frame, Simo, to put himself in a position not knowing. And after he'd done that, there was part of me that was thinking I was expecting Belmo to almost go back to his urethane for the shots in the 10th.
Yeah.
And just say, you know what?
I wouldn't surprise me.
Been close. I'm going to go back to what I can try to hit the pocket and see if I can snap the 10 out. So I was surprised that he stuck with that ball and went deeper into it.
I agree. It wouldn't have surprised me at all to see that. And but hey, hindsight.
And I'll tell you, especially after what he did at the Players last week, because he had used ball A on the left lane in the first match in the step ladder, and then bowled the title match, went to ball B for the first 4 frames on the left lane, and then when he got up in the 10th frame, he needed the first one to shut Sean out. He changed balls.
Yep.
So it wouldn't have surprised me if he did the same thing, but I was almost expecting it. I was like, he's going to change balls here and at least give himself a chance. And he made a much different move, and it wasn't close at all.
It just shows that he is human.
Right.
It happens, right, guys?
We are human. We don't like to be, but we are.
Those matches go by so fast. I mean,
it's amazing how fast they. I mean, Randy even mentioned it. That he says like, that I can't remember who he's talking about, but he's like, that match felt like it was 2 minutes long. And they last 20, 25, 30 minutes. But it's amazing how fast everything goes. It's over before it starts. It's amazing.
So you guys could answer this one. So if you're bowling a match on TV, let's just say you have a bad look, does it feel like it's just taking forever? Like I have the 160 look. I just want to get out of here, and it's dragging on and on and on to when you have a good look and you're striking at will. Does it ever feel like that, or has it felt like that?
I've had several bad games on TV. I think Steve had one or two.
I had one that felt like it took about an hour to bowl.
It's just amazing, and the problem is it's not like a normal tournament where you say, well, okay, I can make these adjustments and the next game it's going to get better kind of thing. It's like you have to do it right now, or else you're done. So you're trying to make these decisions, and sometimes you're influenced by things. The company you work for, they want you to use this ball, or they don't want you to use this ball, or something like that. And that does have an influence sometimes. But because guys drill up sometimes a couple of balls before the TV show. So now they're going with a ball they've never used in competition, and now they're going to throw it. And it's amazing how many guys do that. And most of the time they do all right, but every once in a while they don't. And the other part of that is the lane conditions. It's just amazing how they always play different. Doesn't matter what happens, and there's different reasons for that, the lights and how the guys practice on them, and how all of a sudden those nerves make a little difference. When you're throwing the ball great and you got a great reaction, it's like you can split boards, and as soon as that goes away, all of a sudden you can't hit 2 arrows. So
interesting look at it, Justin.
Yeah.
So that's our recap of the Open. Let's get right into the conversation at hand, shall we?
Let's go.
So I want to ask you guys. Bye, Walter Ray. So, Walter Ray, you were 2-time president of the PBA.
One time.
What?
Well, it was a 2-year term.
Okay. All right. So you're the former president of the PBA, and I don't think that they have a president of the PBA anymore.
I don't think they do. It was a players president. Yes.
Okay. So what is, and I don't know this because the PBA website's really not up to par. What are the requirements to go into the Hall of Fame now? Everybody says something different. So do you know what it is, or Steve, do you know what it is?
I'm actually on the Hall of Fame committee, but I'm pretty sure that right now it's basically having either 10 national titles or a combination of 5 national titles down and 2 majors. So I guess the 2 majors will bump you up to the 10. Something like that. And right now it's kind of when a guy has that, and then they also have to have been been a member for 20 years or something like that. And so there's a little age thing. I don't think you have to have been off tour, because Wes is still on tour and he got elected. A couple other guys.
Tommy.
Back when I got elected in the Hall of Fame, the age limit was 35, and that was it. And so it was like once you're 35, they looked at your credentials and they said, okay, you can be in the Hall of Fame, or you're eligible for the Hall of Fame, and then they would vote on you, and you would either get in or not get in. Now, for the most part, you don't get nominated until you have this certain credential, which pretty much is what they think is a bare minimum to be in the Hall of Fame. So pretty much everybody gets in the Hall of Fame once they get to this point. There was a few years ago that they had 3 players who had very, very similar credentials. And because it was 3 players, and basically all their votes were divided. And I kind of said, you need to kind of, figure out a system that one of these guys either gets in and then the other guys will get in too, because there was a log jam for those guys to get in. I think it was Steve Hoskins and Mike Scroggins and Brian Goebel.
Did Scroggins hit 10 titles, or he had the 2 majors, right?
He had the majors. And so it was the combination, where their stats were very similar and all that stuff. And, so different people are voting for different people. So it was basically, nobody had enough votes to get in. And so they finally modified the rule or whatever, so that basically they ended up all getting in, because they're all qualified. And that's kind of why I suggested, I actually suggested what I suggested on the post a week ago about the point system. I actually suggested it to the Hall of Fame committee. And they've kind of and sometimes it takes a while for something like that to be implemented. And but there are some people who don't think that regional titles should count.
So can you tell us what you said? And so people that are watching, I don't know if Steve knows what you said. It's just like the Reader's Digest version, basically.
Unfortunately, I didn't write it down, but basically it was like so many points. It was like 10 points for a national title. You got double points for a major title. So if you won like the Tournament of Champions, that would be 20 points. It would take you 100 points to get into the Hall of Fame, and it would just be cut and dried. Once you got to that, you'd be in. There's no voting or anything like that. And then if you won a senior a senior national title, that would be worth 5 points. If it was a senior major title on the tour, that would be worth 10 points. If you won a regional title, that would be worth 2 points. If it was a regional major, which there are some, that would be worth 4 points. If it was a senior regional tournament, that would be worth 1 point. And if it was a senior regional major, that'd be worth 2 points. So basically using that kind of a point system, and over the career or whatever, and some people say, well, they don't put minor leaguers in the Baseball Hall of Fame. I think that was one of the big arguments.
Yeah.
And my argument is, you know what? We don't pull for near enough money to make that a valid argument, because the guys on a regional tour, some of them only bowl the regional tour because they have pretty good jobs. So it doesn't make any sense to them financially to go try to bowl on tour, because they would have to do extremely well to make that much money, not to mention traveling away from your family and other stuff that goes along with it.
Yeah.
So there are plenty of great bowlers who bowled part-time on the tour. Maybe they bowled a year or 2 or 3 or whatever, 4, and won some titles, or maybe they didn't win titles, or not that many, but they were great bowlers. But they won a ridiculous number of regional titles. I mean, Steve's a perfect example. How many regional titles you got? Like 35 or 40?
43.
43. That's all. See, so he's got more. So, and you've got what, 5 national titles?
7.
Okay.
And a major.
And a major.
So you're like that close already.
Exactly. That's what,
and actually before the new system, there were guys that had those credentials that are in the Hall of Fame.
Right.
Roy Buckley was the one that we talked about that had 7 titles and he got in.
Right. Yeah.
So
and it's not just Steve. There's other players. You got Chris Warren. I think Guppy Troop.
Hugh Miller is another example.
Right.
Hugh Miller. So there's a bunch of really good players. And I think Ryan Schaefer would probably be really close.
Yeah.
So
his record's really good.
Yeah, we've talked about him.
Yeah, and you know, unfortunately for him, you know, his record in the major tournaments is really, really good, except he didn't win. I think he's got like the most TV shows or the top 5 finishes of anybody without a title in a major tournament, which is not the stat you really want to have. But
he both great in the majors.
I think it was 6 runner-ups we said, and 15 shows and 15 major telecasts.
Yeah,
he never won.
Yeah, it's and a lot. I know a lot of people like to put emphasis on winning, and winning is definitely what we're all out there trying to do. But you know, second's really not that bad. I mean, it is and it isn't. You know, second's way ahead of all those other guys. And there's one other guy that beat you. You know, and sometimes you were the guy who led the tournament and got beat. You know, so
right.
So I'm pretty sure most of the guys that out there, I mean, all of us probably have more second place finishes than we have first. I mean,
well, not all of us. There's some.
Well,
there's some of us,
there's a few, but
I'm one of the few that has, I think, the exact same number.
Yeah, but that's a lot of opportunity.
Regional tournaments, I think I have more seconds in regional tournaments.
Yeah,
I might have more seconds on the senior tour than I have first.
Yeah,
and then you get somebody like Norm Book. He's got 40 wins in 20 seconds, which is really remarkable. And you got
hard to win out there.
Randy Peterson's probably a very similar stat, you know, which is impressive, you know, but you know, anyway.
But you look at that. I mean, how many times have you bowled for the title versus how many? I mean, I've got 7 national titles. I probably bowled for the title at least 7 or 8 more times behind that I finished second. So
right, yeah.
I mean, you've beat me a few times, so.
Right.
Several.
So was it several?
You beat me several times, but we've had our share of title matches. But it's just you look at that and it's like any of those matches could go any way. And that's when we went back to the step ladder part of it. You know, at the end of the day, I mean, everybody just wants to have one match to bowl for the title. You give yourself the best odds, and no matter what happens on the show. But just getting yourself in that position is a pretty good accomplishment.
Calm down.
What breed of a dog is that?
Yeah,
it's Great Dane.
Yeah, you want to see him?
Absolutely.
Say hi.
Oh my.
He's like, you're not paying attention to me.
That's not the dog I saw last time.
Pardon?
That's not the same dog I saw last time.
No, we also have a corgi.
Yeah.
She's a little shorter.
Her legs are
about that big. But it's funny. They go after each other. It's pretty funny. They get along great, but yeah.
So I guess I'm go ahead.
I got one. So back to what you were saying about the comparing it to the minor leagues in the Hall of Fame and the amount of money that we make.
Right.
You don't hear of players that play in the minor leagues that have a second job that only go bowl or go play a couple of minor league games a year. I mean, they're on those teams and they're making full livings playing on a minor league team.
So, and I don't know what the salaries are for the minor leaguers. I know at one time it was not very good, you know, and they're really sacrificing in the off chance that they'll make it to the majors. And if they happen to make it to the majors, they're set, you know.
Right.
That's not the same thing on the bowling tour. You can go out on tour and be a touring player and make very, very little money and actually lose money because you got expenses you got to pay for and everything. You know, people don't understand when you go out on the road, you got to pay for your entry fees, you got to pay your hotel expenses, your travel expenses, you know, bowling balls, you know, and then, you know, you might have expenses at home or probably will have expenses at home.
Right.
Especially if you got a family and all that. So there's a lot more that goes on to it than that. And that's part of my reasoning that the regional players should be involved in that.
But here's the other question. So a guy like Steve, he bowled on tour for what, 30 years probably, Steve? You were on tour?
25,
30 years.
Well, but you didn't bowl 25 years on tour.
Well, I started in 87, and there was a stretch there that I went part-time when we opened our pro shop up. So from like 89 to 91, I bowled part-time, and then I'd won my first title in Edmond as a part-time player. 2 years later, I'd won there again. And from that point, I'd stayed on tour full-time. So out of those 25, I probably had 22 of them were full-time.
Okay, so
still 20 plus.
20 plus years.
Well, that's even still, you know, it's like taking away the regional tour and saying it's not worth anything. And that's kind of where I disagree with that.
And we kind of do too.
And that's why my point system is the way it is, because to me, a national tour is worth a lot more than a regional title. I mean,
Right.
I think everybody agrees with that.
Right.
And I think a senior title is worth less than a regular title. And we've got guys in the Hall of Fame based only on their senior performances.
And that was my next question. So there is a senior division to the Hall of Fame. We learned that.
No. Well, yes, it is a different division, yes. But okay.
So I guess the question is,
not have a regional division, and that's why I like the point system, because it kind of, puts it all. Of course, with the point system, it would make it very, very difficult for a guy just to make it into the tour, under the Hall of Fame, based solely on their Hall of Fame performances.
Right.
Especially with fewer tournaments being bowled now.
Well, part of it's because of that, but I mean, based on what I had, I think it was 5 and 10 or whatever for seniors. So if they'd have to win 20 regular senior tour events. Nobody's done that.
Yeah.
But if he wins like 7 and 6, but even still, there's not many guys have done that. I think if you look at some of the careers of some of the great players, who got in the Hall of Fame based mainly on their senior performances, it probably wouldn't meet the credentials that I came up with. Maybe 1 or 2 of them.
So if they were to alter the rules and let a guy like Steve in, and they adjusted it where 7, 8 titles but 40 regional titles, we're going to allow that in. Do you think that would discredit what you've done, because you had, you kind of earned it? And a lot of people are saying that it would discredit what you, Pete, Norm, Parker has done for all the years.
I mean, so I've got 47 national titles, and there's guys with 8, 10 titles. Does that mean that
already
we're equal or we're not equal? I mean, we're in the Hall of Fame. I mean, they don't say, okay, you're the number 1 guy in the Hall of Fame, you're the number 50 guy in the Hall of Fame, or the 100 guy. They don't say that. You're in the Hall of Fame, you're in the Hall of Fame. There's no ranking system.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's a touchy one. And like you said, I guess the other good example, Walter Ray, you said guys that had a full-time job, was Dale Traver, probably.
Right. Yeah, Dale Traver. And I don't think he would actually make it based on the point system I came up with. He'd be very close though. Because
Dale
he won a couple of
had
senior tournaments, and I don't think he never did win the national. Well, he won
never won.
Dave won the national title, but Dale led it.
Right.
Yeah, and Dale was second. So Dale has 1 runner-up, is his best finish on tour, 52 regional titles, and I don't know what he did on the senior tour. I know he's won a couple, right?
He's got at least one. He won a senior masters against me. And he's probably won. He probably won another tournament because he was a quality player.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Steve bowled against him a lot, and he bowled on tour. Those few years, and he bowled 1 or 2 tournaments a year, and that would be basically it. He's a great player back then, and some of the younger players might look at him and say, well, gee, he had a low rev rate, but they think everybody with a rev rate under 350 doesn't bowl very well.
He was rarely out of the cash, and he was always in contention. So.
Yeah, a great bowler.
Mm-hmm.
So, Steve, I know we've kind of thrown your name in the mud for the past 2 weeks now. What's your thoughts on this? I mean, you're the closest one that we came up with that we feel, Justin and I feel, that you should be enshrined in the Hall. And unfortunately, by the PBA's guidelines, you're not there. So what's your stance? What do you think of it?
Well, I mean, I appreciate the fact that you brought me up, because that means that I have done well enough that people recognize it. So that was nice to hear. And I was checking out the show last week, so I didn't get to comment on anything. That's why I made the comment on the post that you had the other day. But it's like I'm right on the edge of it. And the problem with the regional side of it is there's several of the regional tournaments that I had won in the past that are now considered tour titles. Jonesboro, Arkansas used to be a regional title that I'd won at least once. I might have won that twice. And there's a few other ones that kind of fall into that category that now they're considered a tour stop. And that may have changed how my eligibility would be at that point. But, everything kind of changes over time. I mean, I know the standards have changed over the years with what they did to get people in. And I think, when Walter was going through the you had to be out, I think, like 20 years on tour or whatever. But I think when the PBA got bought out by all the Microsoft guys and Chris Peters and that whole group, I thought they had changed it at one point where you had to have been off the tour for a certain amount of time. It might have been 5 years. It might have been 10.
I think it was something like that.
Yeah,
or age 50 or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I had seen that that Tommy got in and that Chris had gone in. I'm like, well, these are current players, so they might be looking at some different parameters now. But
yeah, I think they backed off on that and made it maybe, and I don't know the exact numbers, but maybe 20 years on tour, or from their first time that they bowled on tour or something like that. And you know, it's kind of weird because back when I got inducted in the Hall of Fame, I don't think the rules were quite right because it was age 35. But what's odd is back then there were very few guys bowling on tour past the age of 40.
Right.
And 15, 20 years later, there was 20 guys. I think one year there was 23 or 24 guys over the age of 40 bowling on tour as touring players, and quality players too. So for whatever reason, things changed a little bit. But when I got inducted, I only had 15 titles. So I actually won 32 titles after being inducted.
You had like a
That's
second
impressive.
career.
Yeah. It's kind of funny.
Yeah,
kind of funny, that kind of happened, and sometimes, they look and they say, well, you shouldn't really go in the Hall of Fame until your career's kind of completed.
Yeah, Major League Baseball is 6 years after you retire.
Yeah, and
that's not bad.
No,
and I think
is the age is different in bowling than it is in baseball. There are not many guys in their late 40s still trying to make a living on the baseball. So.
I almost think it's going to be more of an age thing rather than like so many after you retire thing, because like in baseball, you're not playing past 35 or 40.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But
I think 45 is about the oldest you're going to find. But now you got Norm Duke. He's still bowling great.
Yeah.
He's 57.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, and Walter Ray brought up a point earlier about, it's not everybody looks at the wins. Everybody looks at how many times you win. And you got to look at how, like you said, making the show, getting there and being in contention and being one of the steady players. And, 20 some years out on tour, I felt like I was pretty consistent. I think I went 20 straight seasons where I'd made at least a telecast, which is pretty good considering we had 20, 30 tournaments at a year that we were bowling then. I qualified for the Japan Cup probably 10 years in a row, which you had to be consistently in the top 16. So you had to be performing to get there. And it's just a matter of trying to get everything done when you get on the show. And it's, I look back at the Masters show that we were on in Miller Park, and that was probably the best that I had ever bowled on television. And I was literally one shot away from winning that second major that would have had me qualified based off of these standards. And it was one of those things that in the middle of the match, Rash kind of backed off. He threw a Brooklyn in between two shots, and that ended up being the difference of when he could shut me out. And if he doesn't carry that hit, I could still get up in the 10th and double and maybe win. And it's just the way the game goes. But to have that opportunity to be there going into 10th and still have a chance to win it, but literally one shot away from, maybe having another major, and it can go either way.
The other argument is that guys are saying that it's the PBA Hall of Fame, but the regional tour is still the PBA tour no matter how you look at it. And Steve, 40, 43, 44, 43, what is it, 43?
43.
43 regional titles. You're beating majority of those guys that bowl on tour for how many years in the region. And your region, we talked about this with we talked about it with Wriggles a couple of weeks ago. Jeff has 30 regional titles. You have both of the Travers in your region. Lenny Borsch is in your region. I mean, Weber was in it. You beat these guys. So there
was one summer that I think I forgot how far back it was, but I think Pete and I had bowled for the title probably for a month and a half straight.
And
we qualified on the opposite ends of the bracket, and we always ended up winning matches. And I think we bowled each other for the title 4 weeks in a row. So
that's incredible.
It was insane. I mean, the rest of the regional players weren't too happy about it, but it just happened. I mean, and they didn't put a restriction where the tour players couldn't bowl. And what I used the regional tour as a stepping stone to get on the national tour. My first year on tour, I struggled a little bit because there's a learning curve that everybody went through, and I did not bowl I used the regional tour to get enough experience to try to get on a national tour, but I didn't win a regional until I had bowled on a national tour for a year, and I gotten the experience from that part, and I brought that back to the regional side, and then I started winning tournaments there. So that the two kind of went hand in hand for me.
Yeah, I didn't win my first regional title till after I was on tour. I started on tour full time in '83, and the year before in '82, I had 4 seconds in regional tournaments, and had a really good year, made some decent money, but in the regions, and then went on the tour the next year. But yeah,
they went hand in hand to me.
And now the players now, I think because of the collegiate program, I think there's so much more experience when they go out on tour. I think they definitely have a bigger edge on some of the players way back then, which is good. It's great. Yeah. It's great to see that they're getting the experience, and
and the patterns they bowl on in the college tour they're ridiculous.
Oh, they're
brutal. They're nice and tough. Yeah. And it's everybody blames the bowling balls. How many guys have averaged over 220 in the last 25 years in the U.S. Open?
Oh,
not very many. And in the last 4 or 5 years, they've actually put out quote easier patterns. So on some of the patterns, they're not impossible, and it's not that they're impossible, but you have to throw really, really good shots on a flat pattern. I don't care who you are.
Yeah, that was the second pattern they used at the U.S. Open last week, and that was the pattern we bowled on every day when we were at Carolier.
Exactly. Back in the old days, for 14 years in the U.S. Open, it was a flat pattern every week, every time. And the scores were really, really low. I mean, I think out of those 14 straight years, I think Jason might have averaged 220 the one year in Columbus, where we bowled at 3 different houses, and I think he was the only one to average 220. Out of all the years at the U.S. Open, and everybody talks about the bowling balls.
Yeah, if you could stay within 70 under, you were probably going to make the cut at the U.S. Open, at least the first cash cut.
Yeah, and Carolier, they were always impossible for those couple of years. We had them up here in Jersey.
Yep. That was such a great
nobody
place
was
to bowl.
220.
Yeah.
That center was so
if
cool.
You averaged 210, if you averaged 210, you had a good chance of making the TV show.
Oh yeah.
And Steve, that center it's a night and day difference from when you guys bowled there now.
I've heard.
Yeah. So let me throw another one out there. So we already said that Steve is our guy, Justin. Like, we feel that he should be the first one. Question to the both of you: who's another guy that you think should be in, but doesn't meet the criteria? I want to see if it's any way that we've discussed so far, Justin.
I think Chris Warren.
Okay.
I would agree with Chris Warren. I would put Ryan Schaefer up there.
55 regional titles or something stupid.
He does have a lot.
Chris Warren has 56 regionals.
And he's got 6 national titles, and one of those is a major.
Yeah, he won the Masters, 47 standard regionals, 9 senior regional titles. Yeah. And I'm not including what he did on the senior tour. I think he won the senior Masters as well, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So he has 1 senior title. Mm-hmm. So now do they combine? So let's just say Steve goes out and bowls a senior tour. So he has 7 titles. He wins 5 on the senior tour. Would they combine that, or there's separation between the national and the senior?
I'm not sure.
Dale Eagle got in the Hall of Fame, but he had a really good senior career. I think he only won 4, maybe 5 national titles on the regular tour, and he did very well on the senior tour. I think he probably won 11 or 12 national titles on the senior tour. So he had a very good senior career.
Well, Ron Moore is another one.
But Ron Moore never bowled on the national tour.
No.
Okay.
And there were several guys. I think Gene Stuss and John Handegard bowled on the regular tour and never won on the regular tour. He finished second, I think, one time.
He did win once.
Oh yes, you're right.
He won over when he was over 50.
57, which is really kind of funny because he goes on a senior tour and he starts winning, and I think it gave him so much confidence that he bowled the regular tour that year, and he's 57, and he actually qualified 4th or 5th and ran the ladder, which is kind of amazing, after all the years that he bowled on tour off and on. I mean, his Hall of Fame speech was probably the funniest and best Hall of Fame speech that I ever listened to. I don't know if Steve was there, but It was absolutely amazing because he talked about his trials and tribulations. He'd come out on tour and then he'd go back home. He'd go out on tour and he'd go back home. He'd go out on tour and he'd go back home. And it was, but it was very comical and it was very, heartening. And, it was a kind of story everybody wants to hear, because it was, not a guy who came out there and just went gung ho his first time out and, never looked back. I mean, he really had a lot of, struggles trying to make a living bowling on tour. And then finally, as a senior, everything clicked for him for whatever reason. And then actually, he's the guy who's the oldest to ever won a national title.
So here's two more I'll throw out there. Michael Haugen.
Yeah.
Now, Haugen has 5 national titles with a major.
Mhm.
So, again, doesn't meet the criteria.
He just has the one major, though.
Yes, he has the one. He won the Tournament of Champions.
Right.
But his regional accolades, 29 regionals, 23 standard, 6 senior, not counting what he's done on the 50 tour so far.
And on the senior tour, he's got
a major on the senior tour.
He's got 3 or 4 senior national titles.
And
One
a
of
player
those
of
is a
the
major.
So and
player of the year.
Yeah.
Hugh Miller was the other one. And then we go to Schaefer. And
Yeah.
Schaefer's always been the one that everybody discusses. He never gets the proper recognition.
Well,
But
he
Steve-
does and he doesn't. I think from the players he does.
Mm-hmm.
But from like Steve said earlier, Schaefer, Japan Cup, the earnings list, everything, those things need to be looked at when you're looking at the Hall of Fame.
Yeah,
I was
think
gonna add
Schaefer's
that.
top.
Those are things I look at.
Is Schaefer like 13th, and I think I'm 14th on the money list. It's somewhere.
Yeah,
I
you're
haven't been able to
neck and
find
neck.
it, but we're right there. And
Yeah, that's.
Yeah.
I was gonna say that. I think the point system needs to be like more things need to be considered than just the titles on whatever level they are.
Yeah, what I did was a real simple thing. I mean,
Right, very simple.
You can always add a bonus for for
Japan Cups.
well,
I mean, like
for
Steve talked about.
for being in the top 10 or whatever at the end of the season and money and average and all that stuff. But again, that's definitely where the consistency comes in at, those kinds of things. But it's there. You can definitely add some other criteria, as points or whatever for that to get there.
It's
Yeah,
just
'cause I
so
think-
fast. Go ahead, Justin. Sorry.
Yeah, because Steve just said 10 plus in the Japan Cup. I know we talked about Ryan Schaefer making it like 16 times or something like that. I mean, consistency, like Walter Ray just said, and those things
Good
show. They add up.
consistency. There's a
Exactly.
difference.
Yeah. Yeah, he's not
190 every
finishing
game
in the
doesn't
bottom
get you very
16.
far.
No.
So here's one for Steve.
Okay.
So I know the Southwest region, they have their own they have the regional Hall of Fame. The Southwest does.
Mhm.
And I think that's the only region in the PBA that has a Hall of Fame, if I'm not mistaken, right, guys? I think
you're right,
that's it. So if the other regions were to have regional Hall of Fame and the Midwest has a Hall of Fame and Steve goes in, would you feel slighted that you got into, like, let's say 1A instead of number 1?
Well, I think the regional Hall of Fame would be a standalone. I think those are kind of like their own within their own region. I mean, they've got their own players of the years. They've got their own awards that they do for each of the regions. That, to me, that would probably it would be a great honor to be in to be mentioned in a Hall of Fame in the region. To me, I look at it as kind of like a state Hall of Fame or a local association Hall of Fame. I mean, it's within where you're at, and it's.
Yeah, just
being
because
part
you're in a state or county Hall of Fame doesn't mean you shouldn't be in the state Hall of Fame.
Right. Exactly.
Or the national USBC Hall of Fame. Kind of similar kind of thing.
Right. So I would still, like I said when we came on earlier, I think I'm like right in the middle of that crack where I had a great regional career, but it was part of the national tour that got me that regional career. So I think they kind of more of my time was spent bowling the tour, and the regionals were kind of a supplement in between the tour stops when to stay sharp, to still stay competitive. That was my main goal, was still part of the national tour.
Did you ever win the Resident Pro, Steve?
No, I almost did. Marty Letcher beat me in Corpus Christi for that year. And that was that year I had already won in Edmond. So I was already eligible for the Firestone at the time. So I had asked the tournament directors, if I had won that tournament, would I have counted as having another tour title, a national title? they weren't going to look at it that way. But
Yeah,
they did give you a
don't
banner
count
for
it
the
as a
national tour.
title.
Right.
It
So
gets you an entry into the tournament champions.
tournament.
But
You got a
they don't
banner.
consider it a national tournament.
Exactly. So, but yeah, I came close. Got to make the trip a lot. Now they brought that back, and I didn't get to bowl enough tournaments this year, but it looked like a pretty cool event.
So if I want to word this the right way, I don't even know how to word this correctly without coming off sounding like a dope here.
Well,
no, I'm thank you.
You're my
Appreciate
friend.
that. So what would the right way to be to try to, like, I don't want to say like protest or lobby to try to make a change if that was the right thing to do? Like, what would the necessary measures be to try to bring this to the board or whoever it would be?
Well, like I said,
Clark or whoever.
There is a Hall of Fame committee, and it's basically through that something like that would get modified or changed. But they've made changes without the Hall of Fame committee making some of those changes. So
It did it anyway.
Because the PBA is not a player organization anymore. It's owned by a company, AMF, so Bolero. So, they can basically do whatever they want. And, that's so the last 20 plus years, 21 years, it's basically been that way. It hasn't been a players organization. They've kind of tried to, allow the players to do certain things, but at the end of the day, they have the ultimate say on what's going to happen.
Steve, you said you had won some of those regionals. We lost Justin. I don't know where Justin went. He just vanished. Some of those regionals you won that are now national titles. How many? You said there were 4. You said there would have been
there
4
might.
of them?
I think I'd have to look back and check. I think I had won Jonesboro at least more once for sure, possibly twice, which is one of the extra frame events. And I'd have to look back. I mean, we had so many different tournaments. We used to have the foundation games, which
Coldwater.
The Coldwater is now a tour title. Parkside was a regional. I never won Parkside, but I mean, we had other events. I mean, Lenny used to do the foundation games with Kegel. We used to bowl them with multiple patterns. It felt like a big tournament. There was a lot of the tour guys were there, and to win that, you got invited into the international version of that, which I had won, which wasn't a tour title, so it's really not even in consideration here. But I'd have to look back at the tournaments that I'd won. I could think of a couple offhand that they've changed. I mean, just because they added extra frame and the streaming part of it, they added a tour title to it. So it's I don't want to say it's easier to win a tour title now, because it's definitely not. But there are easier ways to get to a title than there used to be.
It's different. I mean,
for sure.
It used to be minimum 42 games and stuff. Now sometimes you can win with 15 or whatever, 20 games or whatever. They're still very difficult to win. Those guys, that's why I didn't bowl this year. Everybody's like, why didn't you bowl the U.S. Open? Like, if you'd have watched me bowl the state tournament this weekend, you'd know why. Bowling a house shot and bowled.
Right.
I averaged like 222. It was just pathetic. I just and I started out really well. That's the really sad part. So it's I have all the respect in the world for those guys bowling on tour. Those guys are great players, and I think they just don't. I don't think they get near enough credit for what they do.
Right.
People. The average bowler thinks, "Oh, we're bowling on a house condition. They're bowling on an easy condition too." And I can do that. Like, go shoe up. Let's see if you can average 200 on that pattern they're averaging 235 on, because they make it look so easy.
Exactly.
And, like this week, I think the scores are really high this week at the tournament.
Yeah.
They're bowling on a house shot. Go ahead and bowl. Go bowl on what you think is that house shot. You'll still be averaging 20 or 30 pins less than what you do in league. They just have the average decent bowler has no idea.
That was one of the things the tour did for a while when we went to the exempt tour. They would have the PTQ, and you get one amateur that got in, one non-member, and at the end of the week they would show everybody's averages, what they averaged in league and what they averaged in the tournament. And I think they only did that for a few weeks because that might have started to get a little demeaning, but it did show what the difference.
The average of the non-members was way low.
Yeah, and it would just show that they're bowling at home on a house shot. They're averaging 230 at home. Our scoring pace this week, most of the guys average around 215. he averaged 190, 180, you know, or whatever. So it just shows that was different ways that they tried to show that what the differences were between what we bowled on out there. The lane looks the same no matter what. I mean, they put the colored oil down, but it's still.
Unfortunately, I think the colored oil is the worst thing they've ever done for professional bowling. Because it looks like the lane conditions are easy. Because you can see all that oil in the middle of the lane.
It does.
I bowled on those lane conditions. They are not that way.
Mm-mm.
Not even close. And it's amazing how that different shade of oil goes from light blue to dark blue. And you're thinking, oh my God, there's a trench there.
Right.
I'm going to have a field day, and the ball just goes, it just skates on it. I mean, it's just amazing how it doesn't play the way you think it's going to. And, you know, and you're watching the guys bowling like, why aren't they playing here? You know, and it was kind of surprising because, you know, last week, all of a sudden guys are playing straight up on I don't know if you watched the 5 guys trying to go for the seating spot at the players.
Yeah.
I was watching that, and Randy's like, well, nobody played there. I'm like, you obviously forgot last week when Norm Duke was playing right up 8-9, you know, and, you know, I think some of the guys realized that, and Sean realized that, and so he was doing that, and other guys said, well, you know what, he's actually making it look decent, maybe I should try that. And I think some guys get so caught up in, you know, how their ball hooks and stuff, and, you know, doing this or that, but it's even still, even what they were doing on that particular pattern, you still had to make great shots. You can't just throw the ball anywhere on like you can on a house shot.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I bowl league, and I throw the ball and I come back and I'm like, oh my God, that'd have been 3 on the right on tour, you know, because, you know, I missed it so bad. I threw it so bad, and it was
square up, it's 3 off the left,
you know, and yeah, and they have no idea. Now, I remember bowling the U.S. Open in New Jersey one year, and I bowled with a guy who's pretty good. You probably remember Matt Freiberg.
Yeah.
And I crossed him. I think it was the very first tournament that he ever bowled. Now, he hooks the ball quite a bit. And one game, he picked off the 10-pin and the 7-pin in the same game. One game, he had a 6-bagger and got on the 7th shot, he got 2. He got the 6-9. You know, and this is a guy who I think the next year shot 400 over for a PTQ for 7 games. You know, but on the U.S. Open pattern, he was like 500 under. You know, and it was, I think it was probably his first tournament ever bowling on something like that. And, you know, it's just amazing how the ball goes that way or it goes that way. You gotta really, you gotta really split that board to make the ball go where you want it to go.
So in your almost 40 years of bowling on tour, Walter A., and everything you've seen, and Steve, this goes back to you, was that the hardest pattern you guys ever saw on tour? Those years at Carolier when they were 40 feet 1-to-1?
A flat pattern is always tough. I thought the toughest lane condition I ever bowled on, and I don't, Steve might have been there. I want to say Reno in like 93 or 94, and I was on B squad, and I couldn't get my plastic ball on the right side of a head pin.
Wow, I did bowl that tournament. Yeah, they were brutal. There they go.
Yeah, they go. So, Justin, before we wrap it up, I want to hit them with my famous question before we let them go.
Okay, go right ahead.
All right. So, guys, I've asked this to everybody that comes on with us, and Justin, the same answer is given all the time.
Okay.
All right. So, guys, who is the best guy you saw bowl on tour that never went to the winner's circle?
Oh.
And that's kind of the result, and that's the answer or the look I get from everybody when I ask it.
Yeah, that's tough.
Yeah.
There's so many good players. I mean, it's just.
What was the question, Mike?
Hi, Fancy. How are you?
I'm okay.
Can we Google that?
Who's the best bowler that never won?
Who's the best bowler that never won?
Like recently?
Man, that's tough.
In your time out there. So can I give you the 2 guys that we hear all the time?
Sure.
We always hear Brian LeClaire is number 1. And the second one is Richie Wolf.
Yeah, Richie threw.
Well, Richie was a great bowler. Richie didn't have quite the credentials. Richie had one of the most beautiful games you could ever see.
Yeah.
And I think that was more the comment about Richie than than not. I mean, not that he wasn't a great bowler, because he was.
His game was just.
But he
pure
had such a
natural.
great physical game, and for whatever reason, it just didn't translate to bowling on tour. And that there's so much more to bowling on tour than just having a great physical game.
Like Joe Firpo, his title is doubles with Del Warren, but Firpo for sure I would have thought would have had like more singles titles.
Well, and then there was
Gil Sliker was another one.
Don Moser.
Yeah, and he had a doubles tournament. I think he was his title.
And now you got AJ Johnson.
Yeah. I was going to say his
He
name.
won the Japan Cup, but it doesn't count. Right?
It wasn't the Japan Cup.
He won something.
He won. I think it was it was one of the events in Korea.
Who, AJ?
Yeah, he
AJ.
did win something overseas, but it wasn't.
It didn't count for it didn't count for a PBA title.
I mean, he's still bowling, so he has a chance.
Well,
and he will go to the winner's circle. He's too talented.
Yeah, it's just a matter of time.
Well, there is no guarantee.
That's true. I mean,
You think about that. Martin Larson's never won. Martin Larson's talented as shit. Sorry, I didn't mean to say that
good
like
point.
that. But Martin Larson's very talented.
And there's and then there's somebody like Junichi Yajima.
Yeah.
The Japanese. He's basically the Dick Weber for the Japanese Dick Weber. He's got like 46 JPBA titles or something like that. And he bowled great into his 50s. I think he won on the Japanese tour in his late 50s.
Did he ever come over here, Walter Ray, or no?
He did come over here. He bowled a few tournaments over here, but he didn't bowl very much. But he bowled a few tournaments here and there. I know Takeo Sakai did, but again, he only bowled part-time. And Takeo won, 25 or 30 JPBA titles.
Can I throw one more name out?
Go ahead.
Timmy Mack.
Well, unfortunately, Timmy did all his great bowling, as a non-member, and then hurt himself, and then tried to bowl on tour. And unfortunately, he just never was able to regain the form that he had before he joined the PBA.
I think if he'd have done it different, if he started on the tour side of it, he probably
if he'd have bowled on tour, but he was able to make a great career, bowling internationally and stuff and all that. It's kind of a shame. That's one of the really big shameful things about the bowling industry, and unfortunately USBC, the old ABC, was how they classified professional bowlers. He was classified as an amateur bowler. He was not an amateur bowler. He was a professional bowler who happened to not be a PBA member.
Right.
And that's, he was making money. He had made his living off of bowling, and I think it's kind of a shame that has happened in bowling.
Even that's changed a little bit too, because now all these guys can bowl all the nationals.
A little tiny bit, but not. It's still, they classify them, they call it amateurs as opposed to professionals.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
Those guys, most of those guys are not amateurs; they're professional bowlers.
But as far as like the USBC, like the national tournaments and stuff, if all the years we were touring, we couldn't bowl team doubles and singles, and now they're letting these guys in. They a little different, level.
It's a little different,
but they can still bowl it. They can participate. And,
right.
I used to have to buy my USBC card at the Masters every year before we bowled because we needed it to join. And
some of the guys on tour resented it, but there's also a history to that. And some guys don't know that. There's a history to that. At one time, they used to have a classic division, and this is before I went on tour. They had a classic division that all the touring players and other top players, they would bowl a special event, and then the Masters would be whatever the next week or whatever. But they were allowed, they bowled this classic division, and then they got rid of the classic division. And what they did is they put lots of money into the Masters, and then they said, okay, we're going to guarantee you guys entries or whatever, or give you priority, but you got to bowl the pro-ams and this and that, So, but it was kind of one or the other, and that's when they stopped the touring players from bowling. In the national, I didn't bowl the national tournament until 4 or 5 years ago, because I wasn't allowed.
Yeah, I bowled a couple before I started on tour, and my
Right.
most recent one was just a few years ago. Same way.
Yeah.
And that's where Johnny has his Eagles from, Justin. He won, I think, 4 or 5 Eagles in the classified division. And nobody knows that about Johnny's resume. Everybody knows Johnny from bowling on tour. Well, Johnny has 4 or 5 Eagles. Nobody knows that.
But at that time, they had the classified division, which was basically for the touring players.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But they made that thing where, where they modified the Masters. They put a lot of money into the Masters, and they took away the classified division. So it was kind of a benefit for the touring players, because now they have a huge tournament to bowl in, and then, years go by, and then now they modified it again, so there's been changes and stuff that it's kind of one of the big beasts that I've always had, because it didn't make any sense that me as a professional bowler is not able to bowl for in a tournament that has a lot of money in it.
Yeah.
That never made any sense to me.
Right.
And I totally, and now they've got the TAT tournament, the totally amateur tournament, bowling for $20,000 first place. That is total BS. You want to make it a total amateur tournament, you give them a trophy at the end of the tournament. You say, way to go. That's a totally amateur tournament.
Hey, I almost won that 10 years ago, so take it easy, bud.
All right. Good for you.
I got that around at 32, but that was for a lot more money back then. It's changed since.
It doesn't matter. My point is, you call a tournament an amateur tournament and you're bowling for that much money.
Right.
That makes absolutely no sense. And that's where bowling should say, to me, same thing with handicap. If you bowl a handicap tournament, you should never win more than $600. That would take away all the sandbaggers in the world. Well, not all of them, but a lot of them.
Yeah.
Because there are some professional sandbaggers that average 160 until they get to a tournament and average 200 or 220 or 230 on a house shot.
Good luck. Yeah.
Well, exactly. Yeah. And that's my point.
Right.
And anybody who earns over $600, should be considered a pro in a tournament. If you win over $600 in a pro, you should be considered a professional. You should be a professional if you earn that much money in a tournament. That's my opinion. I'm considered a professional golfer because I played a little bit on the celebrity golf tour and happened to be a couple, I actually made some money doing that, happened to get on a couple of winning teams, but because I accepted money, I'm considered a professional golfer. Not because I was a member of the PGA, but because I accepted money.
You took the check.
Yes.
Wow.
And I couldn't play in amateur tournaments. If I wanted to go play amateur golf tournaments, I would have to go petition. And I don't play golf like I used to, and I don't play near as much. But if I wanted to go play in the local, state tournament or whatever it is in golf, I would have to petition them to get my amateur status back, which I'm sure they would do because I'm really not that good anymore. And not that I was super good. I was down to a 1 handicap at one time, but that's not comparable to a PGA player.
It's not Tiger Woods, exactly.
Not even close. Tiger Woods is so much better than that. It's ridiculous. I mean, it's people that don't play those kinds of sports don't understand it. I mean, they say, "Oh, you're 1 handicap. Oh, you're really, really good." And I'm like, "Well, I'm really good. I was, but compared to a tour player who is a -8 or +8 or +9, that's how much difference there is. And not to mention the courses they're playing are way tougher than the course I played, which was a decent course, but it's not like in bowling where I'm playing a par 3 course and I think I'm really, really good.
My first year on tour, my very first year on tour, I roomed with Jim Stefanich, and
oh wow, yeah,
that was pretty incredible. 2 reasons, because great player on tour, and he was an incredible golfer, and we pretty much would go in between blocks and hit buckets of balls in between the 16 blocks that we bowled. So it was great for my golf game, and I learned a lot bowling too. But I mean, but listening to the stories of him, all he was doing was, he was in his mid-40s when I went on tour and we roomed together for a little bit, and all he was doing is he was just bowling tour until he could get out and try to play the senior tour. And after he had played a few tournaments, he would come back and say it's amazing the different level that they're at, and that's the same feeling that I had when I got to the bowling tour. And it's just all relative,
Exactly, and that's why I say the players on tour don't get enough credit. The guys who are good enough to have been at that level and compete at that level probably don't give themselves. They'll have big egos, trust me, but I even think that they don't give themselves enough credit. That they don't realize how good they were to be on tour.
Mm-hmm.
They're the top of their
to be a
craft.
successful tour player. I mean, it's to make money in any kind of professional sport is ridiculously tough.
I agree.
Yeah. It doesn't matter what the sport is; it's tough. And as easy as any sport seems to be, I got a good friend, or at least he was. I played horseshoes against him, and he was a really good horseshoe player. But he wasn't top level, but he was a top player. He's now one of the top players playing cornhole. And everybody, oh, that game's so easy. Go out and play it sometime against one of these guys. I talked to him a couple years ago. When the pandemic just started, he was in Las Vegas the same time we were there when everything shut down, when the tour shut down, we were there. He was there doing exhibitions, and he was like playing anybody who would want to play him. That was what he was doing. 250 matches, never lost a match.
Wow.
Man.
And that's what people don't understand. People that are really good at something are really good at it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really good at horseshoes. I used to be really, 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 really good. Now I'm just really good. So I really suck. But, and the same thing goes with my bowling. I'm still pretty good at bowling, but I used to be really, really good. And it's relative. But bowling's also, because the conditions are so influenced in bowling. Mm-hmm. But a sport like horseshoes and cornhole, the conditions are really not there. It's just amazing how even a simple game like cornhole, you think, oh, nothing to it. You got to go out and play. Even as simple as it is, you still got to be really, 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 really good at it.
Yeah.
Guys, awesome conversation, and we thank you very, very much for it. We could go on, but we're going to wrap this one up here. We kept you guys long enough.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can we lobby to get Jaros in the Hall of Fame, Justin? Can we start like a hashtag or something?
So.
Get Jaros in the Hall, please.
I'm on board.
Yeah, of course.
Do your Facebook promotion thing. Yeah,
right, there you go.
You know what? You make enough noise, sometimes people listen.
You're right, and Justin's the king of social media. So Justin, get on that. Jaros in the Hall, please.
Get him where he belongs.
I think you got to be careful about saying specific players, but
True.
I think definitely having look at some of the other options and stuff,
and that's what
qualifications.
And that's what we try to present in these 2 episodes that we had, was just open the eyes of everybody that's out there and just say, hey, look, there are guys that are right there that may not have the 10 titles, but if you look at their careers as a whole as a professional bowler, they've done more than enough. And, and Steve's the perfect example. Ryan's another one, and Hugh Miller. These guys deserve their place in the Hall of Fame, as we believe that, Justin. I know Justin and I both are on the same page with that.
Yeah.
So, guys.
Well, since Steve couldn't beat me for a national title, I don't know.
No.
But
matches that weren't for the title.
You beat me at Miller Park, though.
I did.
Yeah, the first game.
I almost had to shoot 300 to do it.
Well, I mean, you always had to bowl 300 to beat this guy, it seems like.
I only had 3 bowled at me on TV, so.
And that's a record still, I believe, right?
I think, no, Parker's got 3 also.
Well, does he really?
Mm-hmm. And
Justin, you never told me that one.
And then,
I didn't know that.
How could you not know that about your own dad? And we both have a 4th bowled at me, but it wasn't on a tour tournament. It was for one of the special. It was the King of the Hill when Wes Malott did it against each of us.
Yeah.
So
and I had a 299 shot at me by a guy who only made 1 TV show.
Is that Brian? Is that Brian Albert?
Brian Davis.
Brian Davis.
Yeah.
Brian Davis.
Wow.
Yeah, and that was in my really good. I went win, second win, and the second was to him shooting 268 or 267. He shot 299.
That's when Walter Ray was really, 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 really good, as he said earlier.
I was decent then, yeah.
So the 300 shot at you was Johnny
using the crusher.
So was it Johnny? Johnny shot 300 at you.
Yes.
Norm
had one. Steve Hoskins.
And Steve Hoskins the other one. And there was a 299. You just said that one.
Yep.
And then you've had 299s on TV, or one?
1 299 and 1 or 2 289s. I had the front 10, the 42nd title, which was against Pete in Japan. I had the front 10 against them and smashed a 7.
Yeah,
I remember that.
I was like, oh man.
Well, I know somebody on the left side of the screen got the job done on TV with 300.
Yeah, yeah. He might have I guess Doherty might have now beat you.
Well, he did. I did have the highest and lowest, which was kind of cool. But
biggest
my
difference
phone was
from
blowing
player.
up that whole match when he was shooting 100. I'm like, come on, guys. But it was actually it was kind of a cool thing to say. But now I just one of the many that had 300.
That's even better. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean,
It was in Chattanooga, wasn't it?
It was, and it didn't get on air when it was supposed to because they almost lost.
Right.
They did lose. They didn't lose the tape, but there was an issue with production. So it did make it to air. Like 3 weeks later at like 2 a.m. without any advance notice. But that show did make it through like ESPN Classic, and a lot of people had seen it since. But it was.
It was, and it was big because there was bonuses involved in that.
Mm-hmm.
It
was.
And Justin,
they took care of it though.
I think Dad was on that show too, Justin.
It was like, yeah.
You beat him, right?
Sadly, I did beat him for the title, so
that's all right.
He
won a couple other times.
Yeah, a few. All righty, guys. Well, I think that's gonna wrap this one up. Some great conversations about regional players in the Hall of Fame, the point system, the whole 9 yards.
In bowling in general, it was a good talk with a lot of topics tonight.
Yeah, and on top of everything else we talked about. So thank Walter Ray Williams Jr. and Steve Jaros for joining us tonight. And guys, that's gonna wrap this one up. BuddiesProShop.com, Zone 5 off, save 5% off your next order. And we will see you next time, whenever that may be.
Thanks.
Thank you, guys.